Hello and welcome back to the Double Swing. It's been a couple of weeks and we've been mulling over, stewing, watching what's happening, and for some of us, crying just a little bit on the inside. Our picks for Chengdu have now come to fruition. They've given us their points, some of us more generously than others. Yumi, congratulations, 3 points. Vitality made the grand final, and you did get Maus into the semis. For the guests and viewers, that Furia pick, yeah, that's all you got, but hey, it's plenty. It's enough to get you 3 points. And for myself, look, I'll take the W. The only underdog that scored any points was mine, so I'll take that. But then again, my favourites, kind of disastrous. Falcons G2, only 1 point between them. 2 points total for myself, so I slip even further behind Yumi in the leaderboard. And of course, the viewers / guests retain the lead up at 56 points. Yumi 52, myself down at 46. It's not great. It's not pretty, but it's a chance to redeem myself here. Not too many options to pick from. A new guest, a new day. It could all change. Nero, thank you for joining us. You will have the first pick as you've chosen to go first. But before we get into that, got to just ask you, how are you feeling about the scene right now? Like top to bottom, we've got some really weird, chaotic movements. We're not sure who the top 10 is. Like, are you enjoying this, or would you like to see a little more structure, a little more rigidity?
I don't know, it's a difficult question to answer, isn't it? Like, is it more fun like to have the Vitality era ongoing, or is it more fun to have the parity? And I think we've had so much parity. It was kind of nice that Vitality were doing so well at the first half of the year. But yeah, I think the parity is always more entertaining as like a pure neutral, just doesn't know what's going to happen type thing. And I think having a team like Furia as well is really exciting as joining the top dogs, because I think we all kind of anticipated the triumvirate of kind of the Vitality Spirit Falcons type thing. Like on paper, that should be the top 3, right? So I think it's really fun to have the kind of the Mongols before Senzu and the Furia now, and people kind of actually breaking into that group. And obviously Falcons are underperforming that a lot, but I more mean in theory, I think it's much more fun to have the talent split up and this proper like international era of Counter-Strike. I think it's really exciting right now. And I mean, if the finals went at 8 a.m, I'd be more happy, but that's okay. We've got to hit the tick boxes.
Yeah, kind of going back to back events in China, right? So
yes, well,
yeah. Well, for everyone, even the players are all just like
in that time zone at least.
Straight to Hong Kong. But yeah, so I've not watched as much of Chengdu as I could have done. But once I woke up, the Counter-Strike games were great. So there you go. I'm just the pleb now who only watches the playoffs.
Yeah, Yumi, you have got the lead over me, and honestly, this is Blast Rival Season 2. Honestly, completely forgot Season 1 happened. That's whatever. Still having conversations and problems with Blast's weird branding, ideas for names. I still think they're all over the shop, but that's not the point. We've got a surprisingly good set of teams here. Like when I saw that, people were telling me a lot of teams are skipping this event, I thought when I opened up the page and I went beyond Vitality, I'd find very little. But instead, we've ended up with, on paper, the top 3 teams in the world. You could argue maybe 1, 2, and 4 if you're more of a Maus kind of person, as well as a Spirit who are loaded with talent, Mongols who seem to be somehow okay. Pretty exciting field to pick from, despite only being 8 teams.
Yeah, no, I mean, it certainly could have been worse, and I think there's obviously the conversation about prioritizing your time for the major, but I do think we've also seen, as time has gone on, that the team that has the more repetitions in these tournaments has actually been more successful, regardless of whether or not they have conversations about burnout, not having practice. The teams that take events off always seem to come in a little too sluggish into those types of events, and it's the ones that seem to be kind of taking it in rhythm, which is nice. So I think it's a good kind of inflection point as well prior to the major, mainly because from Chengdu to Hong Kong. And then moving over into that major, that rhythm should be there for these teams that are in our top 5 lists and conversations. There will be very little excuses that they could offer up aside from our calendar was too busy. But it's their choice. They're making that decision to go to these events.
I do wish that the event happened a bit differently though, right? Because it was supposed to be 2 world finals, basically. At least when they announced it, like that's what I was picturing was the 8 best teams in the world turning up twice a year, and it being still a bit exhibition-y because it's 8 teams, which is always going to be a bit rubbish, but it was supposed to be much better than this, basically. And I think the first one was worse, so it's nice that they've at least managed to be able to use their wildcard invites a bit better, but I kind of wish Valve had just said, like, no, you're not allowed to run this wildcard event, and made them make it a 16 team or something. Just make it like a proper event, because like the way it works where they get 2 wildcard events, it's just a bit weird. And is it really benefiting anyone to have this again next year? But I don't know. It'll be fun once the underdogs get whittled out, I think. And that's just a bit of a shame in terms of how you're building a tournament. But, we've got the big dogs. That's what matters.
Yeah, this should be an event that's relatively easy to score points in. That's why I'm hoping, Yumi, you really just screw everything up and I can somehow get like both my picks in and going deep, because 6 of these 8 teams will be in the playoffs. If you finish in last place, you truly were the worst team here. There's no redeeming factor. No, they also went out in groups. They just faced the good. No. Only one team goes out from each group. So you better be careful making your picks, because if you get the wrong underdog, likelihood is they're just going straight home. Nero, you do have the first pick. I wonder where you're going to take this. There's some spicy options. There's some pretty, neutral ones. There's also a few top dogs. Who do you like?
Yeah, pre-show I kind of told you I was going to troll, but we're not going to troll. We care about this leaderboard thing. So I'm going to go boring and actually not go Furia. So only slightly less boring, but I'm going to stick with Vitality, because ultimately I think when you look at the bracket and everything, I think the winner of Group B has a pretty easy road to the final, basically, from the way it's going to stack up. And when you look at the group, it's like, okay, Tyloo, easy. Fury will beat Pain, easy. And then we've got that rematch in the upper bracket, right? So the reason I'm picking Vitality is I think that it's not going to be Ancient again. It's going to be a best of 3, so Fallen doesn't have plot armor. And ultimately, I think Mezzi's not going to have a 0.94 rating, because when you look at them last event, that was kind of the difference. Like it was Fury had all 4 of them firing in playoffs, and Vitality had 3. And I just don't think that's going to happen again. Hopefully, for my pick at least. So that's where I'm at. But that Fury upper bracket game is really where it decides whether I get any points here, I think, because if they get into the lower bracket, then they could be playing like Falcons, Spirit quarters. They've not played Spirit this season, even. Like anything could happen at that point. But I think just they're the best team in the world for me still, even after Chengdu. I think that final was much closer than the Frio. And they might not be the most informed, but I think on like a simulation of this 100 times, I think Vitality is still the best team to pick.
Yeah, I mean, they're the most reliable team this year. Outside of Maus, who aren't actually getting their hands on any trophies because they keep losing to either Vitality, Falcons, Spirits, basically anybody that they seem to encounter on their path in the grand finals. They cannot seem to win. It's hard to really put much past Vitality, especially because I wouldn't even really argue it was Mezzi that really went missing. I would argue Rops, who has been primarily a massive driving force. In the finals, Rops was not there in the same ways that he's been for most of this year. So, yeah, there's a lot of positives. There's a lot of things that can be improved for Vitality in the second run-in with Fury in a best of 3. And yeah, I mean, they're a reliable pick. They still have incredible role players, and the team has not gotten worse. Other teams, I think, have actually just caught up in a more meaningful way coming into this season.
Yeah, there's a case to make that individuals have slightly fallen off a little bit. Little slips. It's not crazy amounts. Like Zaiwu has dropped from, his sort of career best sort of form that he was showing all through the first 6-7 months. Even if it was in a different form, it was more round dependent, a bit malleable to what the game plan needed, what the exact situation needed, a lot more rifling. He still was fantastic. This second period, not been as strong. A slight tick down as well from Robs. Mezzi's not as incredible, but overall they're still playing great CS. And that's really what matters. And when you looked at the grand final, you're right, it was closer than a 3-0 would typically imply. Aside from the second map of the series, which, Inferno, which was, I think Fury had a bit more control. The other 2 maps, they reach 11 first. They're on map point, and they had to choke it away. And you saw it time and time again. It was, sloppy little plays in 1v2s, like knick-knack little details that they got wrong that cost them all 3 maps, arguably, but especially the first and the third, where they were on top, they were in control, they were cruising to victory, really, until it all went wrong. So, Vitality, you can still make the easy case that they are the best team in the world. I think on form, right now, I think I'd agree with VRS. I'd still have Fury. I'd have Fury right now at number 1. I'd have them pipped, just because of that win, because of their consistent winning just streak. I think they've been very impressive and very clutch, able to close, find solutions, all those things you want from a champion. Whereas Vitality maybe slightly lost a bit of that edge. But fantastic pick. Can't really argue against it. Oh no.
I mean, especially in Greece, there was that kind of shakiness. I think in like the kind of the dropping maps in a way that they never used to, I think there is a talking point there. But I think a really good point for them is that Flamesy's back in form. I think he's like even better than Robs in the last month. And that was kind of the start of the second season. Like there was that weird thing where Mezzi was playing really well. So I think it's really good. I think they're a much better team when Flamesy is getting kills instead of just being traded, basically. I think it gives them a real difference.
I would say the one maybe black mark on Vitality is I don't think they've updated their playbook coming into the season. I think from the first season to this one, I think I've noticed more teams exploit a gap or a timing when they identify what Vitality are doing early on rounds, especially on CT sides. And I think it was actually in that Furia final that, the Inferno that's been very reliable for Vitality consistently, it showed massive weaknesses. Like I actually thought Furia were taking good timings on short. I thought they were doing a good job of hitting util on banana in ways that, that was counteracting a lot of the CT ideas that Vitality had. That is the one thing that I'll look at for this team and think maybe there are teams that are going to identify those gaps or weaknesses in more meaningful ways and actually be able to outdo some of the class and caliber that the players offer on this Vitality roster. If they get outmaneuvered tactically, then I can only give praise to the teams that are beneath them in the rankings that are actually doing their homework or finding these gaps properly. And it's why that Furia win felt very, very legitimate as well.
I think Mouse deserve a lot of credit as well for that kind of, because when Vitality play Mouse, because it's like the 20th time they played this year or whatever, it's always very much a chess game, and especially on Inferno, like you can just kind of see. And I think it was the T side of Mouse on Inferno where it was like really like, okay, this is like visible prep even to someone who doesn't watch demos as much as I should. But like that is there for them. I think now is when are you going to update the playbook, and are you just going along the major? Because Apex has talked quite a lot about wanting to kind of beat the Astralis record, right, of how many trophies, and I think they now need to win Hong Kong and the major. So maybe they will have something.
The record's 10
hidden.
in a year, right, for big events or whatever you want to classify events.
I think Astralis got 9 and Vitality are on 8 right now. I think.
Was it only 9?
So I think they can match it by winning one, and if they want to have the outright record, they need to win both. But
okay,
I might get corrected after. I think
that's
Machine
right.
was talking about it, or Sponge in the final cast. So yeah, I think that's probably not going to be the priority for them, obviously. So they probably will use Hong Kong as more of a, finish out this playbook and then really get in there with the major and work out what's going wrong for them on Inferno. And I think there's a few other maps probably, but yes, it's still Vitality at the end of the day. I still think it's a boring and safe pick to start the show.
Possibly the correct pick, though. That's all we can say for you. You've got the points probably locked in there, at least one. You'd expect a semi-final appearance from Vitality at this event. Yumi, you have the second pick. Still a wide variety of options here. Still some title winners and some not so close. But
and I think as much as I really want to just lean in and pick the team I just waxed lyrical about beating Vitality in the grand final, I feel like there's just an underdog that is almost too valuable to pass up. And so I have to go with Spirit here in the underdog category. They haven't looked great.
Spirit are underdogs? Oh,
Spirit.
This.
That's what I'm saying. That's what we're saying. Like, based
on the way that 5 favorites, 3 underdogs this event, like a special.
No. 4 and 4.
That's a lot of points.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So
it may be a lot of points.
Maybe. I think Spirit are probably the most volatile pick I could angle for, because right now this season, sure, they came into the season hot with a couple of trophies when they still had Zontix, but this implementation of Tenir and Jouet at the same time has not worked. Like, the vibes also look terrible, and I hate looking at armchair mentalist psychiatrist takes on Counter-Strike, but I've never seen Donk look as frustrated as he has been in their losing times in these past few tournaments. Because not only is Donk still putting up great numbers, it's maybe slightly less than some of the ridiculousness that he's put up before, but he also has an exceptional Shiro alongside him. It is these new additions and that combination with Chopper not really being a fragging in-game leader that just makes it look like these two have no help. Like, this is the same frustration I saw building on the Nafani, Shiro, and Axile roster back in those days with Cloud9, where you just think you have two players that are so in form and the rest of the pieces can't come together. And I have to believe that at a certain point, Spirit are going to figure it out in some capacity. Whether or not that is changing responsibilities, setting up NER a little bit better. Clearly they're trying to shift away slightly from Donk always being hard entry, always taking first timing, super aggressive. They want other pieces to be proactive. They just need to find ways to facilitate that in some way. And right now it just feels like that's being underutilized. Like they're wanting these players to run on autonomy, and it's almost like everybody's trying to do too much instead of them being properly orchestrated to make the right moves. It's kind of, guys, based on feel, how you going to make this round work, and then nobody has an actual solution because these guys are inexperienced. They're young. They come from teams that have actually postured or brought them up in some structure that sets them up. Zhui was a late round player before, and now he's playing support. And NER was someone that was actually put in positions where people were flashing and causing distractions and creating chaos so that he could then have his influence as well. So that's really where I'm looking at the Spirit, trying to create a solution. I have to trust in the process for Hallie especially, because the players are good. Like I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Zhui is like an actual terrible player. NER is a terrible player. That's just not true. They just simply don't have the right gelling of play styles right now.
I think the word I've used when watching them, just looking at the game overall, T-side, it's just confused. Right, that's the word I'd use. NER0, you usually offer us some sort of numbers, something to really reframe it in the simplest possible way that's also usually misunderstood. Has something noticeable happened in the Spirit stat sheet?
I haven't dug into the specific T-side ones, but I think the interesting thing for me in this team is basically what Zway's doing, because the justification for the move is that basically we're going to scrap the intangibles of a Magix or Zontix because he is replacing Magix. He is in Magix roles, and no one would do good in those roles, right? But the idea was that he would add some fragging in roles that are very difficult because of that aim he's got, right? And essentially he's fragging pretty similar to Magix, but he's dying way, way more. He's way less disciplined. I think I can pull it up quickly. So Zwei in Spirit is, so Magix was someone who would die the same amount as an AWPer, right? Like he'd basically just, he's always alive in those late rounds, and he's got really high cast, really high desp per round, really low desp per round. Zwei is 0.67 desp per round. Magix in Spirit this year was 0.59, which is like, that's an AWPer number. So I think the difference is that they're trying to be a bit more active with someone like Zwei, and I think it just doesn't really suit what Spirit need from their fourth best player, essentially. And I was someone who was quite high on Zwei in Namiga, but there were warning signs as well. I think when I interviewed Lyra in Austin, and I was like, oh my god, this Zwei guy's amazing, like tell me about Zwei. And his answer was basically, he needs to work on his comms, and it's my system making him look good. Like that was the answer from Lyra at the time. And that was a bit like, oh, okay. And then Spirit signed him, and Cologne doesn't go great even with them winning. So I think Zwei is the big question mark for me on the team, more than NER, because that's just a role where the intangibles do matter. There's nothing in a stat sheet other than maybe what I'm saying about desperate round or whatever that is going to point you and say Magix is a significantly better player than Zwei. It's more what else you want from that player. And I also think Zwei's body language, not to do the psychologist thing again, is so different to someone like Magix or even Zontix. Like, it's just not helpful having a player molding next to you. Like, you're the support player. It doesn't matter if you're having a bad game. Just do your job and kind of shut up, basically. So it's just, I'm just a bit concerned about how Zwei is handling the kind of step up, because they do need someone to survive in order for them to then go in and have Donk trade them. I think that's costing them sometimes.
Yeah, just to reframe slightly, and it's, I agree with you actually in a lot of the way that you're sort of talking about what the responsibility of a Zwei entity is supposed to essentially be on this team. He's supposed to be the membrane that passes from Donk aggression into Shiro late rounds. Like, he's supposed to sit somewhere in the middle that allows for a modicum of stability, and that's what Zontix actually kind of did provide for this team. Like, NER is not that reliable type of player. He wants to do things in rounds. You need to have someone that is willing to be inactive so that other pieces can be a little bit more active or have a better understanding of how to approach the rounds later on. If comms and playstyle are up for debate, then that membrane doesn't exist anymore, and it just suddenly goes from hard entry to late round finisher, and there's all the chaos in between is just like a mess, actually.
Yeah, they've
I
got to
think there
figure
is-
that balance out, don't they? Like we see Tanir in this team, and we've seen Tanir on Heroic, we've seen Tanir in a variety of different places, be a really impactful playmaker. Not always first entry, not always first aggressor, first timing, as you put it, quite well, I thought, Yumi. The fact that he would then need something like in the team to then pause, allow him to look for something, look for a fight, I think is part of what confuses everything. The fact that they don't really have the same flow. And before you could argue still, maybe it didn't always work, when it was just the donk show, it did feel a bit like we know what's coming. We know from where he's probably going to hit us. We know how they're going to do it. And if we dealt with that well enough, we're probably going to win the round. Like they didn't always feel like they had a second idea in terms of even early to mid round, in terms of how to approach breaking a team down. And that was supposed to be like, in theory, what Tanir could add. I feel like, when you watch the Zontic's POV, it was just waiting. A bit more waiting. And then eventually, either someone pushed him or there's 10 seconds left. So obviously he has to go and be somewhere. That just seems to have screwed everything up. Just in terms of the rhythm of how they play out around, how they're used to playing, and how Chopper's used to calling. It's just, he's running out of time on anti-force buys. He's not sure where to send his players at all. Even on a map like Mirage, it's supposed to be pretty simple. Like, you just can't seem to get everyone in the right place and on the same sort of timesheet, call sheet, whatever you want to call it. They're just confused.
I agree with this completely. I think it's very hard for someone like Tanir to come in and have to integrate into this system, because Spirit was so used to having these kind of very specific roles for Zontix and Magic's on T side of kind of like the passive extremity players who then have to do horrible jobs late in the round and bomb site entry, pretty much. Like they were not set up for success at all. They're dropping their guns every round. Like this is not an easy thing to adapt your system to, because obviously you don't want to harm Donk's play. You don't really want to have Donk waiting so that Tanir can make a play or something. Like I think it's a very difficult thing to add firepower without kind of losing it elsewhere. And I think at the moment what they're basically doing is having Tanir in Zontix's role, and he's not really able to show that firepower, because a lot of that firepower he did show in Heroic was kind of the nerd style of lurking, the kind of like exactly what Yumi was saying, right, of the mid-round activations. And I think in Spirit he's not really able to do that, because it would throw off the system too much to not have those extremity players alive in the late round, because they need that for it to work, really.
Yeah, it's kind of rough actually watching some of the games with Tanir so far, because, for all the highs that he had with Heroics, I feel like I'm seeing him hit brand new lows here on Spirit, where it's like, they brought him in, he's supposed to be firepower, and we're seeing him have like 5 in 16 games or, 4 in 15 or whatever. Yeah. And these are not scorelines I'm used to seeing, even from all that time he had on Heroic, where actually more was asked of him. Greater risks were actually used as bargaining chips for Heroic wins. So yeah, it is just a bit shell shocking. Like, I was never really massive on the Jouet and Tanir angle. I always thought Dontix had more value than Jouet at the very least, but I wasn't expecting even this, really. I thought there would still be a version of Spirit that was maybe less organized but far more brutal, like vicious in a way, and instead we've just got like this strangely neutered version of the dragon that once was.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I expected them to adapt their system much more to the new players. I think it feels a bit too much like they're trying to plug and play with vastly different players. And obviously Tanir came in mid-season. That's obviously upset that a little bit. But I don't know. They knew he was coming in the summer. They could have adapted earlier. I just think they haven't.
Yeah, they could have asked Zontix to do something, but no, they. I think they did have a vibe, an energy, right? Whilst waiting for that move to happen, of we are literally just waiting. Like, all the interviews, all the talk when they get eliminated from tournaments, or there was an element of that, just kind of unbothered just attitude. I don't know how to explain exactly, but they just didn't seem that fussed about rushing to make a new system or doing any particularly hard work to rebuild what they were. Like, it was just, we're just going to be who we are, and then he's going to arrive.
It's also hard to justify that when you come into the season when you win a couple tournaments, right? Like, True. How do you then go, well, now we have to change everything to make it work? Instead, it's like, well, we just won tournaments and we weren't even at full fighting strength. Surely it could work. It just doesn't.
It's like a dog 160, isn't it? It's like it's the thing of, and I think you are seeing that. I think this event was like the first real event other than EWC that Shiro was actually better than Donk this year, and I think that's that's not a good sign if the new additions aren't working and if Donk is actually looking mortal and looking frustrated, like you're saying, like that is because Donk knows that he still has a chance at number one, obviously, but it's that type of thing. You do have to have the team around you to get into the playoffs and be like, they haven't even played Vitality yet. He's not had a chance to show off in the head-to-head when he's supposed to be in this amazing form, right? And it's just, the year does feel like it's slipping away a little bit.
We'll see. We'll see how it feels to the end of the year, because we will still have a ridiculous set of stats for him. He'll still be the record-breaking, highest KPR, probably highest rating ever recorded across all versions of rating, etc., etc. All of that will still be true.
And just to bring it all back, I pick Spirit because I think they can do it.
Just the cherry on top of that shit Sunday that we put forward.
Yeah. No, you think they're better than Passion, Pain, and Tyler. You don't think they can do it. Different thing.
Controversial, I think. Controversial. But hey. On to me. I now have back-to-back picks, which is great in theory, but considering my underdog pick, which I obviously would have wanted, is gone, and I now have to pick between two favorites and judge which one I actually think is going to win here, because it's always hard to decide whether or not a team will benefit from having just won an event or will have a sort of lapse, like a sort of release of emotion that leads them into a bit of a slower, more resigned sort of mood for this next event, which is less important, fewer big teams, just more Counter-Strike on the Asian continent. It's just a bit awkward. Will it affect them? Now, if I didn't include all that sort of very personal stuff, I would have picked Furia. But I think I'm going to leave them. So Yumi, you're welcome. Unless you're feeling particularly pro-Asia this week and you're going to go Mongols, I think you're going to end up with Furia, because I'm going to take Falcons. And a part of this is stubbornness, because I've picked them before. I've decided I think this roster is going to work, and so I will keep picking them until it does. I went through a similar phase with a variety of different teams, including Spirit at the start of this season, when I refused to believe that the NER version of the squad could be anything but better. Holy shit. What a car wreck that's been. But I still think this Falcons roster is going to work. At some point, it's going to win another event. An event this time would have to go through at least one of Vitality or Furia to do it. But I think it's more than possible. They still have maybe 3 of the 10 best players in the world. Like, depending on the week, depending on the event, depending on how slanderous we're feeling, because I know a lot of people have been railing on m0NESY this year. I see the comment all the time. It's like, if m0NESY didn't play like absolute shit in the first season, and I go back, I'm like, which events? Like, there's maybe 2 where he's sub 120, and I'm like, that's it. That's his slump. Like, he's been fantastic all season. NER0, despite taking a step back, and I think properly doing this, like, he's allowed Kyosuke to somewhat integrate. Like, it's not perfect, but he has taken a step back in terms of at least just the tempo at which he plays has adjusted to account for the fact that they have a kid who's a ferocious entry and openings player who needs to be set up and let loose, really, like, just let off the chain. I think NER0's done a decent job of adjusting to that, but also maintaining his numbers and taking over games when he has to, or rather can. Like, he's had massive train performances. He's had really big series against big opponents. Overall, his numbers take a hit, but he's still a fantastic rifler. And of course, Kyosuke, the next donk. That was always the conversation. Hasn't quite been the next donk. But he's also not quite on Spirit. So that conversation gets a bit murky. But look, the raw talent's clearly there. And he's doing things for this team, which at times does look like he's being asked to do the impossible. We don't always think they're the best team at setting up their entry fragger. But thankfully, they have one with such ridiculous aim that he still has some of the best numbers in the entire scene. An absolute monster fragger and a talent for sure. So just with that trio, I'm happy. But I'm also somewhat warming to the fact that they can keep Tesses on this team. Even if in the long run, you might still talk about a post-Kixan Falcons. Maybe the NER0 IGL thing that everyone talks about finally happens. I still think Tesses makes sense in his roles. As far as, originally when this comes together, Tesses is another entry. Does this actually make sense? I was also dubious. And initially, it didn't look great, but it's slowly getting better. Plus, the team around him is just getting used to him in those roles. And I think that's starting to make more and more sense. So Falcons playing decent CS right now on top of everything else. It's not as good as Furia. It's not as pretty as Vitality or Furia. Hell, I'd say Mals are even tactically better than them. But it's good enough to where their real firepower shines. At this event, look, maybe hope for Furia and Vitality to do us a favor. They're in the other group. Knock each other out. Maybe send someone else to the sixth place, to the top 6 position, what you would call it, the quarterfinals. It's not really a quarter, but
yeah, maybe
the silly playoff game. Maybe they can take a loss there, and that'll open the door for just one upset win. All that's needed to win this event. And that's why I'm liking Falcons. I just expect Furia to come off their high, just have a little bit of that sort of crash moment, and Falcons to make the most of it.
I think the Kiyosuke conversation is an interesting one, right? So Kiosuke, whatever, I don't care.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we could see from Spirit, we were just talking about it, right? If they can't even integrate a natural lurker like NER, like they would have had no chance trying to get Kiyosuke into that system. And I think the next donk thing is just very standard to a point where a kid who's turned up out of nowhere and dropping 120 ratings, like, that's not normal. Why are we pretending that that's normal?
It's fantastic rookie year, isn't it? Like, it's one of the best we've ever seen, but we have to keep comparing it to Donk, which screws everything up. And
Molodoi, of course. I think there's the difference is it's the playoffs of Falcons, right? I think someone brought it up the other day that like 17-3 in matches in the last 3 events, but those 3 match losses are just what's ingrained in everyone's minds, and it's the moments where it matters, where he's sometimes less able to be that consistent. And I think he is someone who just dies so much. He just dies so much. He's just chasing all the time, which always hurts his stats a little bit in those situations. But then that Mirage the other day, where he was the one who was stepping up when m0NESY was having a terrible second half and NER0 was a bit quiet as well. I think that was a really good sign for them that that's an arena game in front of a lot of people. He is kind of able to step up in those moments, even if we're not always seeing it. Like there is something in there that we're starting to see.
Yeah, I think that's the one positive that I'll draw from the Falcons, because I'm usually pretty down on this team. Like I'm starting to push this narrative that, you know, NER0 teams just cannot be tactically sound. I don't know what it is. Every team he's been on, they've never had perfect execs. They've never had perfect crossfires. They don't trade always the best. I have to at least give them credit where it's due, in that I wasn't expecting the role responsibilities to shift up in the way that they have. You know, that was always my concern with the Kiosuke angle, was actually, would they even give him the right amount of space to be good enough for the team? And the reason for that is that, you know, NER0 and him are actually fairly similar players, just in terms of like their aiming style, what has been successful in Kiosuke's sort of journey upwards into tier 1 Counter-Strike. And to see that at Chengdu, and I think I really caught Yanko commenting on it the most, actually. Just the idea that positionally and priority-wise, they are giving Kiosuke that room now. And I think it is reflecting in his ability to perform, but it's... Yeah, I think there are other angles to scrutinize this team for, whether it is in these playoffs, in important matches, whether it's m0NESY that goes missing, NER0 that goes missing, Kiosuke that goes missing. Like, I feel like these 3 pillars of the Falcons are actually not consistent enough in those playoff games yet, which is strange, because, you know, I would look at m0NESY and I'd look at NER0 and think, you know, outside of maybe a grand final of a major, I put them in reliable shoes, really. Yeah, they've got things to figure out, but I think there's improvements to be made tactically. And I'm with you on the Tessus is half decent and good enough to stay on the roster side of things. You know, I was in Heku's stream watching a lot of Chengdu games, and she seems to be pushing for him to be in the top 20. He's not a top 20 player. That's just dumb propaganda. He's not a top 20 player. He just simply isn't. But he's good enough, and he's doing a solid job. And he actually has come in with like very important rounds from time to time, which is all I can really ask from him being the fourth worst player on the team, right? So yeah, I mean, the Falcons aren't a bad bet, especially because the first round they play is a Spirit that honestly could just be god awful. You know, the Falcons have proven far more than Spirit have in terms of consistency, even in that and in the transition of bringing in a new player. Even if Spirit have won titles, this version of the roster, like, I'd give Falcons over Spirit every day. So
head-to-head counts as well. That's really helpful. But I know on the Tessus one, I think he's still well on his way to being the kind of winter scapegoat. even though it is sort of working, but to be honest, I think any rifler with good headshot aim and a really good personality and like drive for the game, like can be a good anchor. Like I pretty much think you can convert people as long as they've got the personality. But you look at the tier, there's got to be some sort of push again in the winter. I just see it happening. I don't think it really matters how well he plays. I think they're just gonna scapegoat him because that seems to be what they do.
I just don't know who can actually in-game lead the Falcons. Like,
yes,
legitimately, outside of one of the big stars, which is why Nico kind of makes sense. I don't know who could control or who can dictate the change in play style in the right way. I just don't think it's possible. Carrigan actually might be the best fit, funnily enough, but I wouldn't exactly put his stock very high right now either.
No,
do you believe in stock for IGLs like that though? And it's the kind of thing the foreign always says, right? Is that IGLs are always able to come back, and I think we've seen that with Fallen in terms of once you put an IGL in the right environment, like it doesn't really matter how out of form they're supposed to be. Like I think once you're motivated and in the right environment, you can get back to that level. Like I would kind of love to see that, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's just strange because what is it? FaZe have always run off of like star-driven power. That's just how it's been, and that's why everybody always looks at FaZe when they underperform and think, well, the stars didn't show up. But that's part of the thing. Like, if you can't make that system work, you have to adapt. The Falcons do need to adapt at a certain point. I don't think they can just brute force every game. I think the game is developed enough. Like, teams like Vitality, Furia, Mouse, all tactically are way, way better and are working with far less expensive and, optimal pieces necessarily. I do think there is some value you have to put to that. Like, there's a reason players like Shue, for example, weren't exactly courted all sorts of directions as soon as he was removed from Mouse. I have to put some stock in that, simply because if you can't make that style work in a next team over, then who's to say you even necessarily hold your value? It's a good place to start, though, on a rebuild. If you are a team that's looking to like slingshot up the rankings, it's the best place to start.
I don't think the situation of Falcons is even that dire, though, because we talk about this on pretty much the same sort. We're on the same wavelength. Like, they're fantastic playoffs. There's these losses where certain pieces go missing. Is their ability to brute force not there? Really? Is it not there enough? Like, it was there all the way until they had that one big loss, you remembered. But they beat Mouse twice at Pro League. They took care of business against the superior tacticians with brute force. Twice in a row. They did it again here in Chengdu. Like, this isn't maybe they could if you got rid of all the tactical teams for them. No, they've done it before. They have beaten the tactical teams, the geniuses who are so much smarter and better arranged than they are, because shoot heads is half the game. I do think they can go and win an event with shoot heads. It's just clearly they have these big underperformances in the very important matches where they are just individually not performing. I think that is still a win condition they have. It doesn't disappear. The tactics don't change in the playoffs.
But why can't we have both? Why can't you give a little bit of structure to shoot heads? Like, why can there not be a foundation lane underneath?
Because there is something there. They're not doing things at random. They are not just, half-assedly telling Kioske shoot heads. But I think it's a bit overblown to say they have like these massive tactical deficiencies. I just think they have a choking problem more than anything else right now. Like, it feels a bit. It's a bit weird to think about in that sense of like, we have to just put it down to choking for players of this experience. Some of them, we've seen them forever, but it's just been a part of their story. So I think that's fair enough.
Narrative. It's the same narrative as the G2 team, and I think that's an obvious reason why. And it is that if you're having Nico and Minus on the team, it has to be player led, and it's obviously going to eventually morph into the same system when Kixod and Zonic's stocks are so low. Like that's the way they're getting out of this slump. Is Minus even said in an interview, like, I want to take more freedom. I wasn't feeling comfortable being a supportive AWPer. That's just not the way I play. So it is always interesting about the brute force, about how much firepower you actually need to be consistent. I think it's to their benefit. I think I'm surprised people haven't done it before with the infinite money glitch, because CS isn't a league table. It's not about being consistent for 12 months in a row. It's about winning events, one-off events. And if you are able to peak at the right time, then you can win any event. And aiming to be Vitality the first half of this year is like, teams will say they want to do that, but that's not really realistic. It is better to peak at certain times throughout the season for those really big events. And I think that's part of why the Monassi conversation is so interesting this year, is that he's gone from that big game player to someone who's stunk it up at all 3 super elite events. And this Chengdu semi-final was even worse than it looks on the stat sheet, honestly, with the first half on Inferno and the second half on Mirage. So it's just, there's something going on, but that doesn't mean that that's a terminal issue. I think it's like you're saying, like, I would never be surprised if they won an event just because of the quality on the team.
Yeah, the quality is definitely there, and you see it as well, just a glance into the games and also a glance into the stat sheets. Monassi is one of a kind right now in the scene. He is playing far more aggressively, far more free in that sense than anyone else. At some point, you do have to go back to the question of, do you need Kixan? Like, you do have to keep having that conversation. It gets boring, it gets annoying, talking about Nico IGL. I get it. But if you're going to always have these player-led systems, at some point, you're going to have that conversation with Zonic and just finally buy in, finally actually try it, finally actually go for it. I don't know who you bring in for Kixan. Hey, maybe you bring Magix back, but
Magix.
Yeah. Or Magix, yeah, steal him from Spirit, but
genuinely, I think he'd have a great time with Kioske. Number 1 fanboy on the same team. Just have someone there who, I think it'd be perfect for the team. I think you'd see a different Testas if Magix was in the team as well. I think genuinely just going full intangible on your 5th player and having Nico IGL would be great for this team.
Yeah, we'll see what happens, and we'll see if they can make it happen at this event, specifically in terms of getting it all right at the right time, peaking for the right event, Blast Rivals Season 2. Not quite what we had in mind, but here we go into my second pick. I need to take an underdog, and I've been left with the prettiest of the underdogs, the best looking, the just fantastic teams. Pain, Tyloo, PassionUA. This is what we live and breathe. I really want to pick one of those bottom 2. I really want to skip Pain because we used to talk about them ad nauseum on this show. They were always the underdog in every event, and everyone always picked them, and they never did a damn thing anyway. But they would always show up for the next event, and then they get picked again, and the loop continued. So I really want to either go all in on Jam Young, giving everyone the old entry frag sort of domination he did that one time this year, at Fisher. And I also really want to talk about PassionUA again, so I'm not really sure where to go. I'm going to go with the team that I think is better constructed. I want to go with PassionUA. I've ended up in a really weird spot with these picks. I was really hoping with the third place in the order I'd get something better out of this, but here we are. Look, PassionUA have been disappointing to begin their run as PassionUA. We all know this is
great start.
I'm going to keep it a buck, I'm not going to
just call it complexity and just pretend it never happened.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I didn't think their, Draculan second place was very impressive. To be clear, their victories over Basement Boys and Zero Tenacity 2-1 did not make me very happy. Like, I didn't come out of that going, wow, they're ready to dominate. Kvem has looked to put it in a very complex term. He's just looked meh so far on the team, which maybe the saving grace is that so far Grim hasn't underperformed criminally like he always does next to another Star Rifler. But realistically, I was hoping they would have actually 2 Star Riflers and not just one or the other again. Like when Grim was bad next to a Liege, I was hoping I'd get just 2 good Riflers, but instead I haven't quite seen that from this roster. What I can say I have seen is at least they've taken care of business when they've faced garbage teams and then unfortunately struggled when they faced real ones. That's just the reality of what they are right now. Can they move up? Can they be better than that is essentially what I need to demonstrate, prove, argue for. And in that case, I can give you at least the credit. They have their IGL coach combo back together, the one that made them better than some of their parts in the past, the one that allowed them to optimize at least a bit, make a few top placings that were surprising. No one's expecting the roster they had before to be particularly successful. They still managed to make the occasional run, the occasional placing, the occasional big win. So JT with TC back together, I think is a very interesting part. I mean, can't overlook Monster as an assistant coach. I think has actually been through a lot of different sort of orgs in the past. I think can add a little something to this team, because it was a question we had back when TC got cut from Complexity. Like, maybe there was something stale. Maybe they needed some fresh ideas. Maybe in the coaching department they have found that. Holzerk has been solid all year. This has been one of his best years. We had the one joke that he's had his one contract year and then everything else has been bad. This year, I think his contract might be up again because he's actually looked pretty solid. I'm excited for what complexity. I almost called him complexity. Damn it.
Yeah, that's tough.
What PassionUA are going to do here, because they have shown a couple little positives, and I can draw on past things I've seen from them under a different banner, which I won't mention, to continue to be excited. Hopefully Kvem can give me what I've been looking for. Kvem for me was one of the underpraised, underseen, undernoticed Ukrainian talents over the last sort of couple years. Some of that being the teams he was playing in and against. Part of that was the org he was playing for and what happened with that situation, which I will leave well alone. Hopefully he can shine alongside a Grim who's been fantastic for this specific iteration of the team. And that'll lead them to a couple of upsets because they've got the group with the Mongols, with Spirit, with Falcons. It is the harder group to make it out of. This is the less rational choice. Like they need an upset. They can't just beat an underdog to make it through. Spirit, as much as they are an underdog, we all know that's a massive upset if you can beat them. They need to make it happen. At least they start with a game against the Mongols, who are currently a little bit... Well, we thought they'd be crippled. Turns out it's less of a broken leg and more of one of, like maybe a stubbed toe. At least if they might be too busy going to actually be at full strength. So fingers crossed that upset happens and PassionUA prove me right.
Yeah, to pull back the curtain a little bit before we went live with the show, there was a conversation about trolling the draft and picking PassionUA potentially first even. Would you like to... I would love to hear your perspective as to why that was even a temptation of yours, NER0.
Well, I mean, it was before I knew Spirit was an underdog, first of all. But secondly, I think it's... I just didn't want to be boring and pick Vitality, and obviously I did end up being boring and picked Vitality. But
one job. That's why we brought you on. It's for the excitement.
Of course, negative charisma FC, but that's okay. But I think there is something to be said about PassionUA. I think they've not really played a proper event for like 2 months. Like since they even moved to orgs, they've not played a proper event, and I think they're that type of team who sometimes does play to the level of the opposition a little bit. Like I have quite a lot of faith in JT and TC to, especially with the map pool that it is now. Like their train doesn't look amazing against the teams they've been playing. Their overpass is like not really played that much, but I kind of back them on those kind of weird maps to be able to kind of surprise people, especially when you've not played them in 2 months and they've been all over the place doing the kind of the Messioso circuit of optimum VRS points, but maybe not optimum, like actually getting them ready to play good teams again. So there is sort of a weird thing with them in that they haven't played for 2 months. And Grim having like a 120 rating, that's sustainable if you ask me. So why wouldn't I pick them, basically? I can't now.
Yeah, I took them away from you. I knew you'd want that, but last pick of the show, wasted on PassionUA. No, we've got to make it more interesting. Got to talk about the local boys or the Brazilian team. I don't know. PassionUA is perfect midway segment.
I can't argue for this team.
I know you can. Come on, you can try.
They are. The thing is, even when we used to have conversations about complexity, and Nyx and Sixy when they joined the roster, it was very much just. It felt like a holding pattern to one, save money, and two, remain decently ranked. I have to just look at the PassionUA's acquisition of this roster as just like a pragmatic business move. They see it as a more reliable opportunity to make it into the major cycle. They pick up an NA team that are going to be consistently ranked decent enough, which is maybe even going to be more dubious moving into next year. Actually, with we're seeing the rise in some of the South American teams, and that ranking actually is going to be, I think, up for grabs more now. It just felt like a relatively cheap high ranked team that they could justify making into the major, because EU is still very, very hard to get into reliably. So I don't know. I this team is kind of a nothing team to me. Like I still get the same thing that I have been getting for the past year. Kvem has not moved the needle significantly. It's kind of whatever to me. Like I have no interest in this team as someone that's not North American, that doesn't see this is like a high value investment. Like Liquid are more of an interesting angle for me as like a quote unquote NA fan, but that's because they have pieces that are, I guess, from outside the region. So
and they're always going to have that issue, right? Of the even when Elige was there, they weren't that marketable, because if you're a North American fan, you're like a FaZe fan because you watched them COD quickscopes 10 years ago or something. Like no one was apart from the real like OGs who love the complexity brand or something, that just it wasn't going to happen for them. So you're right. I think it is kind of the classic buy a VRS slot type thing. And this event is not the event they're going to be interesting if they're going to be interesting, just because that group is so rough. But I don't know. I think against the Mongols, we know what Mongols are like with vetoes. They're just going to do what they always do. And I think there is an opportunity there for a team that hasn't been able to play these top teams for so long to kind of try and come up with something fresh and actually try and surprise a little bit. So that was my rogue logic. But we all, even I knew I was trolling by even pretending I was going to pick them first.
Oh, well, look, we have to, if we're going to try and give them the best chance possible, the best case we can. Yumi, you say the Kvem acquisition doesn't really move you.
Much better than 60, though.
If you watch Kvem and have you watched 60? Like, that's the question.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that Kvem is a better player, and I understand that he's
better. It is better.
It is better, but I also saw great games from 60 from time to time, especially on train. I remember a 60 train. Listen, I just don't see it. There's no allure to me, basically. The best thing that I could offer up is that Kvem gets poached. Like, that's actually the best thing that I could see happening to this PassionUA project.
Right.
You never know when a Horzak's just going to drop 20 clutches in a tournament, though. You just never know when it's around the corner. And it could be against Mongols and Sphere, and it could be very, very funny. So
yeah, straight to semi-finals.
Yeah.
Great underdog pick.
I can just only hope that PassionUA have learned a lot from Draculan Season 1, Season 2, and Urban Riga Open Season 1.
They won that.
Yeah, I know they won it.
They beat Eyeballers twice. I mean, that's a great team right there. Eyeballers.
Fantastic team.
JW in his prime.
And Big. Honestly,
Yeah,
you guys are just
that's-
so
that's-
negative.
Big also
win.
in their prime.
That's a free win.
And Gentlemates that one time. I'm scrolling for a lot of red, but I am scrolling. There's stuff there.
Yeah, we'd have to talk about their first couple of games they played, where they lost to just everyone and went straight home from Draculan Season 1.
Don't scroll that far.
On the real wrong
Don't scroll
foot.
that far.
Yeah, Yumi, we're back to you. You've got your favourite left to pick. Mongols, Furia, the two teams available to you.
I mean, I'm just gonna pick Furia.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, are you going to be that creative?
We've already kind of talked about Furia a little bit as well. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I think they play very, very solid tactical Counter-Strike. They've got good players in their roles. I think, this reminds me a lot of like old school Furia, of what could have been when they had Henny and Art. They've got a very aggressive rifler. They've got a very hyper aggressive AWPer as well. Players that are willing to take fights alongside a Queserado and Yuri that feel like more free. It's like this is what Furia was supposed to be the first time. That's essentially what I see it as now. They have got more tactical prowess. They have good, reliable sort of niche map picks. Like, not many teams are sort of specializing overpass necessarily. I think Furia are actually one of those teams. I just like the direction right now. Whether it's Seed or Seed or whether it's Fallen coming out with these game plans, I think there's good preparation coming into these games. They're noticing tendencies and they're making use of it. This is the most stacked roster I think Fallen has legitimately had. Outside of the early Luminosity days, like if he's got 4 rifler or 4 players that all can pop off in a game. Yeah, it's an exciting time for Furia. This is the right time for Furia as well.
Yeah, I just love this team. I just love the way it was built. I love everything about it, to be honest. I think and I really still want to know what it was, because I know they've got a data team and I know they've got a big data team in terms of what you're talking about with that kind of opposition analysis. Like Hepper, who is their data analyst, he did a few articles for HLTV. I've spoken to him a little bit. He can do crazy things with demos, and maybe he was less public facing than some of the other guys, but like I know he's doing something that's really helping, because I think he joined around a similar time as the start of this year. And yeah, it just works so well. I think Yuri's one of those players who, for a while, I was never really sure what role he was. It's almost like Stown. It's like, I know he's good at trade fragging, but I've got no idea where to put him on the map and be happy with him. And I think this kind of morphing him into this kind of anchor lurker is actually doing so well for their team, because it lets Queserado be more active. And I think that is important. I mean, he's always going to be Queserado, like that's not going to change. But it is much better to have him in these rotate spots where he's able to be the one being baited in sometimes. Like he can do his stupid thing where he hides under balcony all around or sandwich or something because he's not having to be the anchor somewhere. I think it's just working, and the role fit is so good since adding Yakinda. And I think they've just completely worked it out with a rifling IGL. I think it's really helped Yuri find himself again because he has had a few years where it's just not really like the numbers might be similar, but I feel like the last few months his impact has been very, very different.
Yeah, it also hits differently. The numbers, that is. Like when you have other players who come in and step up, and all of a sudden I don't need Yuri to be prime Yuri, HLTV top 10 level Yuri. Like, that's never really necessary when you have Yakinda finding all these openings. You have Molodoi just asserting himself across all 3 stages of the game, and then you have Serato just popping off. Like in his own little passive way, but he's really is just popping off and winning them rounds, winning them games. On top of all that, yeah, the calling has been solid. The game plans have been really good. But then on top of that, in the middle of a game, like against Vitality, where things start slipping away, things start breaking down, they've got a streak of rounds going, you just know that timeout's going to work. I don't know who exactly it is going to make the call, but they're going to take that timeout. They're going to sort of assess what they're doing. They're going to find a solution, and they are going to somehow come back into the game. They have that toughness of like championship teams where it's, even if it's not working, we're going to somehow persist. We believe in ourselves. We believe in each other. It's going to happen. And that's very important. I think beyond just being able to shoot well or have good strats, being able to believe in each other and believe in the sort of ideas you're going for is critical. And they've clearly got that in abundance.
And whether it's on a timeout or whether it's Fallen just randomly coming out with a multi-kill out of nowhere, those have actually been part of the win conditions for Furia. Because, give it credit where it's due. Like, Fallen is rifling, not necessarily always super reliably, but he's having like very high impact, like swing moments for the team. And on this run at Chengdu, like that was very much reflected in some of how close some of these games were. Like Fallen's stats weren't great, but he had at least 1 or 2 impactful moments in each and every one of those maps, which is, just great to see that one, he's been able to sort of extend his longevity of his career, but that he now has he can actually be more of the bait that Serato needs. Like that's essentially what has made the fangs of Furia sharpened, is that there are more pieces that are legitimate threats that can be baited, essentially, for these 2 pieces that have been such great closers historically for the brand.
Yeah, I mean, Fallen just loves the CT clutch, doesn't he? I think I can't remember how many he won, but people just keep whiffing on him and it's CT 1 or 2s.
It was
He's
so
got impeccable movement.
Yeah. He shouldn't have won those, but he did, and that mattered. You know what I mean? Like in the moment, I'm looking at all the POVs, I'm like, this man should not win this clutch. But you choked, so he does. And that's frustrating, but also good on him for converting. He also had some really, like, I considered these like the maximum buy-in. Like when you do this as an IGL who's, recently convert to rifling, or in some cases, a lot of time just recently convert to IGLing. I know you're on board, you know who you are. When he jumps around a corner, like full wide swing, leaping in the air, just someone shoot me. I know he's there for the boys. He's supporting at maximum. Like that's full buy-in to the role, to the responsibility. It's what I call the bird from sky death. Like you're just dying so that someone else gets a trade kill, and Fnatic buys them for way too much money. Like you are 100% setting up your team, and nothing else is in your mind. I've seen a few of those sorts of moments from him in recent finals, and I'm like, yeah, he's there. He's fully there. Do I think they win this event? Clearly not. But again, that's nothing to do with the Counter-Strike. I think it's hard to win 3 straight events. Like, it's really hard. I mean, they've been traveling a lot, playing a lot. It's a tiny turnaround. They're going to be playing the same CS at this event. I just think they are going to finally trip up a little bit. It's not going to be that dramatic, but I think they will trip.
The only 3 teams at this event that have won a big event this year are Vitality, Fury, and Spirit. So, I mean, maybe Falcons with Dexter, if we're going to include them. I mean, or maybe the Mongols with EWC.
Big event covers also some of the other wins that didn't feature Vitality, or like it's a bit...
Yeah.
Like Fisher Playground can't. I think they're legit elite event, I think, and it is so important for them. But also, I'm really interested to see how Molodoi does this event, because I know when they had the Stana and the Playground win, like Kaser always talks about in interviews, like he did get a bit carried away for a second with the repeaks and everything. I think it's interesting to see a young player kind of find himself in these moments and see what he's going to do when he's, you know, re-peeking into Zyra 1-0 instead of Blitz at this event, maybe. So it's that interesting thing of the psychology of, can you reset for an event after it's literally like one day, like one travel day, you're into the player hotel and it's just you're in again, you're in the games again. So, but as long as he does, and I think he's not shown any sign that he wouldn't be able to maintain this level of form, like that team is absolutely deadly. And it's we talk a lot about the firepower era, at least I think it is, and I think this team is right up there with them. And I think we've just kind of done the thing with K-Serata where people kind of forget, because he's so easy to write off as a beta when your team's playing badly, that now that the team is playing really well, you see how impactful having a play like that actually is. And it just works so well, so seamless. And the other thing I just wanted to add quickly, I know I'm waffling, but I think Yakind is basically the equivalent of when like in football, when a football manager gets a new assistant with really good ideas, basically. And you've got the Fallen's leadership, which is like probably as good as anyone's, but I think having Yakinda be able to add his tactics without having to shout at like OC for not understanding what's going on is so important to this team. And I wouldn't be surprised if in a lot of those timeouts it is Yakinda who's kind of picked up on something. And it's just such a well-built roster. I could talk about them all day.
It's definitely something I've thought about recently as well, is that like so many times we see players transition to in-game leading that almost can't go back. Like they've unlocked their third eye and there's no way that they can close it now and go back to not calling. But honestly, I think Yakindar was always the underrated pickup on this roster. Like his stock was at an all-time low. The impact he has in terms of implementation of Molodor in the first place, with the ability to translate and make that team environment work. And then, like you're saying, you know, from a tactics angle, some of the things that they were doing in Virtus Pro when Yakinder was at his most lethal actually was based around like some small anti-stratting or player tendency that they were trying to exploit. And I do think that, the extra ideas is always going to help, because there was a time for a while where even if Fallen wasn't playing the best on the AWP, the calling did look just actually just kind of bad in places. So the whole thing is just really reinvigorated Furia in totality, which is it's hard not to like this team because it's such a good comeback story for so many of the people on the roster.
Yeah, and the one thing that does annoy me, and I've been very honestly pro Fallen, pro Furia the last like 3 weeks, so I'm just going to throw out just a bit of something just to piss the people I've been really nice to off. He was shit for 6 years, lads. Stop pretending he wasn't. Don't pretend this isn't a massive, shocking comeback. He was awful for like 6 years. He admitted he was bad. His teams then played terribly. Eventually, now he's found his spot again. And I think, quite importantly, we talked about before with IGLs can just come back. A part of that has to be they have to bring themselves back. And he has. Like, he's up on the meta. He understands the game he's calling in now. Fully. Like, this is Fallen calling some of his best CS. A part of that is the fact that he himself is back on the right sort of track mentally. And I think it's showing, it's reaping massive reward. If he wins another major with a completely different roster, then we start having another one of those really annoying conversations about GOAT IGLs, etc. But just for now, it's just a fantastic comeback story. But please don't forget, it's a comeback story.
Yeah,
he was in the
it's
dumps.
That old saying, you know, sometimes you got to crack a few eggs. Sometimes you have to steal a few paychecks before you make a beautiful omelet in the end.
Yeah, sometimes you need to be paid like a Michelin star chef for like 6 years whilst you make hamburgers that
while
be
you
worthy of
learn,
McDonald's.
you adapt and you learn.
Yeah. Then
well, this is the thing, though. Yeah, this is the thing. It's like, how much credit can you give to him for the tactical kind of revolution that we've seen in the Furia team? I just think it should go to Yakinder. I think Fallen's obviously an amazing captain, but I think this idea that he's suddenly tapped into the meta, I think if he is, then it's because Yakinder's showing him, probably. At least from my perspective in the interviews that I've seen and everything, I think that's probably more likely what's happened. And then Fallen is someone who's very authoritative on the server and knows how to call the right thing at the right time. But I do not think he would have got there without Yakinder to help him.
Okay, yeah. I mean, a little balancing of the narrative there, finally. Not just praise for Fallen's calling. Crazy. We'll see how long that lasts. If we get a few negative comments, I'll immediately release a video talking about how great Fallen is, just to get everyone back on my side, because I'm only here for the audience sort of support. I'm here for the cheers. I'm not here for the
pandering, boy.
Nero, you have the final pick of the show. You have
Yeah.
Tyloo and Pain available to you. I know you didn't want either one of these, so I'm sorry you're stuck with them. It's devastating. But who do you prefer?
That's okay. I've got my points from Vitality. It's fine. I think, it's more fun to pick Tyloo, but Jamming had a 1.04 rating in the last 3 months, and it's just not going to happen again. And I'm not going to pretend it's going to happen again. So we're gonna pick Pain, and this is because I care about the viewers on the leaderboard, because I know you're going to be bored about talking them again. But I think they are interesting to talk about right now because Snow has kind of had this role change, and I think there is more to talk about than there has been basically since Austin. I think there's a lot more going on with Pain than there has been at least previously. And I think Snow is doing well in these aggressive roles. I remember when they signed him, he was like a 16-year-old aggressive kid for Casemiro's esports team or whatever. And then they made him the support player, and it was always a little bit weird. And he's always just like this happy-go-lucky kid. He's like, I can play anywhere. I'm so happy all the time. I'm so happy all the time. And it's like, we get it, you're happy. But I think now we are seeing the actual talent that made them pick him up at the time. And it's like, it's one event, and he basically just farmed Tyloo. But that's maybe the bar we're looking for in Pain now. Like, I think the major semi-final was not the bar we're talking about anymore. But, they are the dregs. And I think the reason they're the dregs in this and the last pick of the show is basically because of what DGT's done on this team and the lack of what he's done on this team. And I know that when he moved to Spain with 9Z, like, he was a little bit uncomfortable with like the adaptation. And I just think, like, they even talked about Portuguese as a language barrier thing. And I just think this is someone who always had such good stats for 9Z. And I just can't really put my finger on why he's not been able to do it in Pain at all. And it's just, that's the kind of thing where I thought he'd be their best player, and he's just nowhere near it at the moment. But I do think they're the best underdog to pick because of the group they're in.
You're nothing but consistent. I think the last time you were on the show was for Cologne last year. I went back and looked before we had you on, and I think you first picked Pain in the underdogs category for that event, and some of the through lines are still there.
That was the prime time when I complained about always hearing about Pain. It was roughly that period during last year. They're just at the events, and every time we come out the event, I'm like, all right, cool. They didn't really do it this time, or maybe next time. Repeat.
Yeah, it's always there. But back then it was Lux choking on land, so they've got they have changed their team quite a lot, and I think someone like NQZ as well. I think it's just always like, I mean, if they weren't going to get Molodor, they would have had to try and get him, right? And it wouldn't have worked as well because he's more passive. So I'm glad that they went that route. But if you are talking about really good passive AWPers in that region, like, there's no one better than NQZ. Like, it's just, yes, obviously you get to the point against the really good teams, and there's going to be that firepower gap because DGT isn't a 120 rating player anymore. He's a 0.9. It's just, that's my main drawback with him.
Yeah, and to be honest, we like to look at Big Uzera as like a fragging in-game leader. He's someone that's, essentially taking a step back, and I think has talked about it in interviews where he said that the idea that they're having to shift responsibilities because his style of entry fragging and his style of calling was very much based around his aggressions, and it became essentially one-dimensional, readable, something that was other teams could react to it better. So and I've made this comparison before, but it's something that the Mongols had to do as well, where Blitz was always taking hard entries and had essentially to change the style of calling so that the team was more threatening, and that takes some time to implement. And right now we're seeing Snow actually thrive in that environment, but the rest of the team are still struggling to necessarily make do. And it's not just Big Uzera, or not just DGT. It's also David Deus. These are, for Digit or DGT, he always used to play like aggro lurks. Honestly, the way that he would get kills on 9Z was like, you wouldn't see any lurker traditionally make this type of stuff work. Like, he was walking through like 3 smokes and flanking players out yard or whatever on nuke. Like, he would make pretty outrageous plays that were very high risk on 9Z, but there is none of that aggressive risk taking on this Pain. It's far more calculated. They try to play a little bit more by the book, and that's just not why you bring in a player like that. It's like putting chains on the line and expecting it to still roar the same. It doesn't have the same emphasis or the same impact anymore. So yeah, I actually just have big questions about this rifling quadruplet that we have now, because I feel like the identity is somewhat lost. Even if Snow is having far more impact on T sides than he has in however many. I think it's like a year and a half, 2 years he's now been on the roster. I just don't see enough out of the rest of the team. No one else is really engaged in this current transition.
it's almost like they misprofiled Davideus or something. It's because in my head, at least when they signed him, he was supposed to be that kind of really aggressive spearhead to kind of take over some of that from Big Azera. And I just think it's just not really happened. Like he's kind of gone back and back and the role changes for Snow, I think, are a direct, relation to Davideus not really delivering. And he is going back and back, and now he's just more that kind of supportive rifler. And it is hard to kind of build your team around that when someone like Snow is doing well in these aggressive spots, but they're clearly not all in on this because, they put him outside on Nuke a few months ago. It's going okay, whatever. So they're doing a few more now, but it's still like Dust 2. It's Big Uzera in lower B. Snow's playing top mid on those defaults. So they're not all in on Snow being the star rifler now. Like there's still a bit of trepidation, and it's not really worked out how they want their rifle quadruplet to actually work. It doesn't feel like it's set. It feels like mid-season they're kind of scrambling and have kind of lucked out a little bit with Snow's form ticking up as much as it has, considering how poor he was in support roles for most of the year.
It is funny though, because I think before Davideus joined this roster, essentially all he was like the Nithon bodyguard. Like Nithon was so bad on the red cannons that that essentially on the default they had to sit arm in arm to each other so that Nithon could then jump into a bomb site and then Davideus would get an entry. That's the way that I saw him being like an aggressive rifler, was by having this meat shield that he protects for the majority of the round that he then redeems later in the round to make it work. So it's just odd. It's just odd. I want more out of everybody.
Yeah, well, more out of everyone. You're going to need it. Probably to get like a deep run here. Fortunately, it is, the last two underdogs, I left them. They're both Group B. You're picking between them to make the top 6, the faux quarterfinal. Like, there's a good chance you get there. They just have to beat Tyloo.
They just need to beat Tyloo. Yeah, that's it. And Jam Yang will have the best game of his life because I called him out for having a 1.04 rating, but that's okay.
It's coming, and that's okay. I'm fine with that.
Just before we wrap up, because that's all of our picks now done, the only team that I think is justifiably going to crash out is probably Tyloo, of the teams we haven't picked. Because, yes, Jamyang did have an anomaly like life event for Fisher, and the team is still a little rough around the edges. Like I might love Jamyang, I might love G, I've enjoyed watching the rise of the journey, but they've been significantly propped up by that Fisher win for the majority of this season, especially. The real team that could surprise people still is the Mongols, because they still play a very good baseline game. If everybody's going to be realistic about what they do, Controles, it was the anomaly in that he was just finding like crazy triple kills out of nowhere sometimes and saving them in Chengdu. But that's the environment he comes from. In the show and our lead up to Chengdu, that was what I wanted to tell people the most, is that like this guy is not a bad aimer. He is legitimately quite explosive, but he's been always in like chaos environments. There's no setup, there's no nothing. But the Mongols played super puggy at Chengdu, and I'm not expecting that here at all. The week that they've had to now prep and play with Controles, I am expecting a few more of these execs and more targeted hits that was totally absent in their Chengdu run. Like, it was actually just strange to watch them play pugs, essentially, versus pro teams, and still make it to the playoffs somehow. So,
yeah, I think it's surprisingly scary, aren't they? Like, we a lot of people quickly just dismissed them. That was a surprisingly intimidating-looking Mongols coming out of that event, and not just because Controles had a couple pop-off maps. It was also just the team played damn good CS. Surprising. Even if it's puggy, it came together surprisingly well.
And 9-10 was amazing as well. But I just want to say quickly on Tyloo, I think like the Inferno, they still pick it like 4 out of 5 times, and they've lost the last 4 and like 5 and 6. So I just think they're just one of those underdog teams. And I think we saw it with Lin Vision with Dust 2 as well. And they were too reliant on that, and it's fallen away. But Mongols, yeah, I think it's ultimately I'm always going to be a bit down on the team, because when you replace your star rifler with someone who is significantly worse, like as much as people have been pleasantly surprised by Controles, that is mainly because like we were not expecting very much from him in the first place. And I think it's that case of I wonder what they will do with roles long term, in terms of there's been a bit of talk about maybe Techno should have more star roles after what he did in EWC, and that potential is there for him. But at the moment, it seems like they're just kind of putting Controles in Senzu's roles and, like you said, pugging it out a bit. So I am interested to see what they'll be like this event. But unless Blitz and Techno really step up, I don't see it as sustainable in any way that they're going to be able to beat the top 4 teams at this event.
Yeah, maybe relying on Techno, on Mazzinho, those kind of guys to be like your principal stars. I mean, look, they have the aim for it. Like Mazzinho, I see it. Like mechanically, he could be a really, really potent player. It's just always been a question of how much does he really make use of roles, and how well can we set him up, and how much does he still have to learn? Because he's still a kid. I mean, we always forget that with the Mongols because we're just so used to them being here, just perennially dumpstering everyone who's been a long mainstay of the scene. It's like, oh, they must be also experienced. And no, they're all kids. Blitz is the oldest. He's barely 25. He's 25, 26?
24.
He's 24,
He's even
damn.
younger, yeah. Techno 20 yet?
Oh,
I think Techno's
Techno is 20 now,
20, yeah.
which is just
kids.
insane.
They're kids. They're not even close to being like the finished product, even now, despite having seen so much from a guy like Techno. And, you know, I always voice frustrations because I see all these mistakes, all these things that annoy me in his games. But then I'm like, if I'm the Mongols, oh well. I've got, 5 years left of him being in his prime and not having kids? Like, keep doing it. He's going to keep being a really sharp, really impactful aimer. And if we need to, we can shift our game plan. Because look, Senzu's the star. No other team that makes it this deep in events with consistency has this underwhelming of a star in terms of performance. Like, he's not that insane in terms of his carry jobs. He has fantastic moments and great playmaking, and he can break the mold in a way that allows him to win a round they shouldn't. But I'm not going to pretend he's on the Zaiwu Donk tier. I don't think he's a Nico, a Kyosuke, a Monesi. He's replaceable relative to them. So I do think this team should remain threatening, even if I am, fingers crossed, hoping that they lose here.
Yeah, I think the thing for the Mongols is that they haven't really necessarily had like a proper hierarchy of stardom on the team. That's why this move feels as bad as it does. You know, there was kind of Senzu, 9-10, and then a bit of a drop off. You know, maybe Blitz, but you don't really want that to be a reliable star piece. So yeah, it's a strange time for the Mongols, but you know, strategically, that's where they've been able to edge out the extra rating. I think they've played good Counter-Strike in this year, and you know, one player being moved around, one that has been actually habitually inconsistent, or maybe a bit feast or famine. They have had to be a good tactical team to get there as well. So they're not going to fall off the face of the earth. They're maybe just going to float slowly downstream.
It's also temporary, right? Like, I think we can't be too harsh on them, because if the Huns didn't make the major, then maybe they signed Cobra Zeros, had a really good season, at least against local opposition, whatever. So it's until January when we have the permanent roster. It's just they're going to do their best, and we'll see if the dead team kind of effect is as strong as it was in Shanghai.
A very real possibility. And that's going to wrap up the show. A little bit veged for as I've labelled them in my timestamps, the Unwanted. Mongols and Tyloo, the two local teams not selected in an Asian event. Feels bad, man. We're on such a good sort of high when it came to Asian CS and the vibes. And right now, a bit of a lull, but hey, as you said, next year, next season, when things are permanent, things are locked in again, we can start being excited a lot more. Thank you for joining us, Nero. Great set of picks. I'm sure you're going to get a point or two. I'm hoping not too
Always
many.
a pleasure.
I'm personally hoping that some of these risks I'm taking are going to pay off at some point. I keep taking big risks to try and close the gap, and the gap keeps getting wider. But yeah, come back next time. I think the next event we preview is going to be the major, stage 1. So yeah, we're going to get down in the weeds with some real tier 2 sort of teams. Tune in. We'll probably have an expert on hand to break it all down with us. Yeah. Remember to like and subscribe. Leave us your comments telling us your thoughts on all of our picks if you'd have done things differently. And hopefully we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.